The assignment was to post anything. Anything in any way influenced by Kley. Here we go. Jody, thank you. You've done good work, and it is obviously influenced by our chosen master. And thank you for your appreciation. I hope to do more of this. Thank you, Jody, for your kind words and for the work. You put a lot into this week. Christina, you have been into this using the Natural History Museum of Paris as a place to get inspired. I know the feeling. And you feel that there is a progress, especially in your mind. That's where it happens. I call it 11-year-old energy because 11-year-olds often have that I can do things spirit. May it last all through your artistic adolescence and with your language of can't wait to keep studying and producing, you bring a good spirit into this community and your work. Let's look at, that was from a week ago that I had made a mistake and left it out. Here's the one you did this week, and continuing in the spirit, again, with appreciative words and letting us know you used micron pins. Did I mention last week anything about watching out for detail in the halftones? I think I did. Christina, that's the one thing I would recommend to you, is that when you start to put your hatching into your next round, see if you can say, I'm going to leave a number of these light areas empty. It doesn't mean that that's where you'll go. I'm going to show you one student in here did a slide that we're going to end on where there's nothing left to imagination for the rendering. It looks quite remarkable. But this is one thing about understating something, and because there's so much hatching going on in there, that would be something to at least give a try. And if you're going with that weekly model, 1 week, maybe 2, 3, or 4, where you work, do a lot of drawings, but make a rule. I'm going to leave a lot of the halftone areas open. You may even overdo it. And then you've got a sense for whether you're overdoing it or whether you're underdoing it. Very good work, Christina. Rebecca, I looked them over. I am so pleased. Growth and goodness. Thank you. I love you, how you made the dog recognizable as a Doberman and also turned it into a graphic shape. And that this did not happen in a single attempt. You also did, I think, what Norman Rockwell's illustration teacher emphasized, which is to crawl into the frame and live inside the world of the picture. And with concern for the shapes, staging for the camera. Thank you, Rebecca. Alyssa, too, caring about the shapes. Alyssa, we did 1 month on Kley. You put a lot into it, and you refound Dulac, whom you already love. And you pointed us to Norbertine. For those of you who don't know, Norbertine, Austrian, Norbertine overlapped with Kley. Look at the dates. All the way into 1978. Led Zeppelin was still a band. Overlapped with Kley and overlapped with Shapes. And a worthy influence. Alyssa, thank you for what you contributed and pointed us toward. Bernard, they say not to compliment people for who they are, but rather for the effort they put in. You put in effort, but I think we can tell an archetypal bent by watching what someone does when they have a choice to do anything. And I think you are a visual storyteller by inclination. How your style develops, how your drawing skills develop, is a creative choice that you make. It may be to heighten your drawing skills. But if I were to pull the "you seem like the kind of person who would thrive in the mountains or do better at the beach," I would suggest that heightening your drawing skills may not be the best direction for you, but I would suggest you scour cartoonists, narrow down your influences stylistically to a few. You're already inclined toward simplicity. It's in some ways, stylistically, technique-wise, the opposite of what we have been seeing here with Christina. It's leaving out a lot. And I mention that because we are going to talk a bit about style today. Thank you for showing us what you do. I hope for good things with you. Carl, wonderful. The analytical study, when it gets into your subconscious, will allow you to continue with this freedom that you've already embraced. These don't look overly fearful. They look pretty free. And these studies will help you take it to higher levels. Carl, I apologize that I must be brief. This is worth more time. And I will return to this study of yours later. Damien, the feeling of messing up, then turning it into excitement. Excitement about messing up less someday. Good attitude, Damien. Garrett, I read your comments about your process, the sketches, and how a final image can come up to competence, and then the little almost throwaway sticky note drawings that become some of our best discoveries. Even if they come up rough, they come up unfaked. Art asks about how some artists are happy with their work, some grieve over it. Many of the best seem to border on manic depression over their work, loving it or hating it. Loving and hating are both emotional involvement. Artists of any merit tend to get emotionally involved in their work, and that means ups and downs. Now, you said here that any comments would be most welcome. I cannot offer anything better than what Dr. Eddie O'Connor offered in huge, generous clumps in that course I've touted so often, especially the chapter on perfectionism. If you haven't read it, Art, go to him, not to me. That's the best I know. But several of the other chapters deal with emotions, advantages, and pitfalls. Emotion is one of the Myers-Briggs personalities, Myers-Briggs temperament polarities. The way he does it is that, Myers-Briggs did it, Carl Jung, Kiersey, is F is for feelers, and T is for thinkers. And feelers are emotional types. Thinkers aren't that emotional, and they include a few great artists, but I don't want to get started. Maybe I'll offer that class on temperament and achievement in the arts next year, but in the meantime, Dr. Eddy yet again. Thinker, feeler. That is one polarity. Escher was a thinker. Kubrick was a thinker. Rockwell was a thinker. I've combed through those three artists for that. Many of the great artists, maybe most of the great artists, are feelers. A few, like Van Gogh, are intensely both. But I don't want to get into that. Vivian, you are doing something here that I was going to recommend today. You're titling. Titling is creative. Robert McKee has a whole spiel about creativity and titling. I have a couple of spiels. One of them is that in titling, consider irony. This is called the Maiden's Prayer. Last week, I suggested for staging it, if you're inventing, now we're analyzing something that's already done, and Clyde didn't write us to tell us anything about it. But if you're coming up for your own scenes and your own characters, if they just pop into your head as a vision, that's great. And if the vision is interesting, that's great. But if you're actually having to work out what's happening, as people often do from a script, I suggested last week that his objective may be to impress her. That was his objective, what he's consciously trying to do, and that his emotion might have been pride. You might find other words that are better, but the idea is he is in a state that is emotionally high, and there's a confidence to it. Whereas over here, we've got an objective that I suggested would be to not be impressed. And I suggested her emotion would be disgust. Now, it could have been, again, I'm just guessing. I'm trying to teach you something. It could be disappointment. Whatever it is, it's negative. And she's holding it in. And that's where the joke comes from. Now, Richardson taught us always to seek between the objectives to see if they can be put into conflict with each other, because conflict creates a scene. I'm picking up what I was teaching you last week. But what if her objective is to be impressed, and her emotion remains disgust? Now, she is trying to be impressed. After all, this is who she prayed for. This is who God gave her. Got to make the best of this guy. If you are ideating a staging to figure out what's going on between characters, check to see if their objectives are in conflict. If not, here's why Richardson's approach is so useful. It's simple, but it can get very complex. When a character's objectives and emotions are in conflict, At the job interview, our objective is to do well, to make a good impression. And our emotion is fear or even terror. That is a scene in itself without ever showing the interviewer. When you hear the news of that person who died, and your objective is to show my grief, but your emotion is positive. We can study other ways that visual storytellers stage scene. The one from McKee on applying a gerund to every action is useful, and it cuts through a lot of crap that you find in baggage-laden acting classes. But Dawn's is the best approach I ever found. And that, I have more to say on that. Somebody pointed out that, yeah, it's confusion, bewilderment. Dawn used to say the emotion for confusion is bewilderment. It's the what the, she does have something like that. Micromanaging definitions of what's going on is not as useful as I mentioned last week, getting into the skin of these characters and finding the conflict. Now, it's called the Maiden's Prayer. I don't dare show you Education for Marriage. Blessed with Children. Life through the eyes of a storyteller who names scenes. Does a lot of conversations between species. I'd love to ask him what prompts it. A good deal of fatherhood in my life was awareness that I was speaking to a being who until recently didn't exist, who now does. A talking animal with opinions. Maybe as a result of looking at scenes like Kley's, you're starting to see the world like storytellers do in terms of characters in scenes. I have it happen obnoxiously. This came up in my as I was going through photos this week. When I first saw this at the Fullerton College campus, I felt like I had to avert my eyes. It's two kids looking at mom and dad doing something weird. This one is in denial, looking off into the distance. This one is about to comment. Vivian, you are doing stuff like that. And one lesson is that ironic titles are one category of creative titling. If you haven't seen Vittorio De Sica's 1948 film, Bicycle Thieves, it's worth seeing for more than the title, but the title is part of the lesson. Vivian, do you know about New Yorker cartoon caption contests? If you don't, they're worth attention, especially for you, because you already do this. That's why I'm taking time to comment. May you do it well and better and study the best. Carlos. Interesting observation of gender roles revealed in men's and women's relationships to elephants, protecting or terrorizing in Kley's work. I got into William Blake obsessively for several years and started to notice his gender depictions, a good deal of fire and water. Good shape studies, Carlos. The attention to negative shapes by doing what you've done here can influence your sensitivity in your own work. To see the shapes and agonize over them or rejoice over them, if you're a Myers-Briggs feeler, or if you're the thinker type to say that doesn't work. There, that works, let's move on, and never shed a tear of joy or grief over the work. These kind of studies prepare you for the joy or grief or calm observation of design. Nabani asks, how does Kley leave so much of it blank and yet make it so not empty? Good question. The short answer is he does what Hitchcock did. If you watched Rear Window, You know you had to sit through a good deal of empty, boring drivel, calculated to make you feel as if it's no special world in there until it is. That was one of Hitchcock's strategies, the power of contrast. Empty until you accept it as empty, then packed full. It creates a wallop. Nabani, I'm going to give a longer answer a little later about studying Kley for his abstract patterns. You are working on the literal level here. A woman in motion, a man, a rock. Will shift attention from that to the pattern, and I recommend that for you. Lorenzo, as I mentioned earlier to Christina, I recommend that you simplify, but I recommend it to you more strongly. Leave out the hatching. Save it for later in your studies. You're going to shading very quickly. Not a bad thing. But for you, a bad thing. I recommend to you that you conscientiously do those form studies with no shading like Carl did over here, or little shading. Do that for however long it takes to get that into you. Then you earn dessert, and it will look more convincing. Matt, you tried 3D. I'll show you 3D today, Daumier sculptures. And no, I won't elaborate on the NS spectrum another time when that's the topic. Malem, good work. It's worth zooming in on. Keep at it. And maybe a lesson or two about style today will help. In fact, let me offer one now. You use thin lines. Thin lines are wonderful. They're like a 12-string guitar. You may be the artist who your fans say, I love those thin lines, but because you do that already, try some thick versions like this as a discipline. These are harder. Try some as a stretch beyond your inclined range. In fact, that would be a great one to study from. Sometimes he works as if he were drawing with a tree branch. Let's zoom in on that. Look at how thick those lines are. And convex corners. This has got some of that quality that I showed, I've mentioned before, I think, in there, where if the egg is round like that, that is as much a convex, not really a corner, but it's convex plane break, and he's finding ways to put plane breaks in there that look and feel convex. Malem, you go. Rose 2, stating here that drawing horses freely is something like having a lot of money. And of all those things you mention here, looseness, passion, aliveness, anatomical knowledge, melded with the forms you are already working on, that's what I prescribe for you. You're doing the other stuff fine, the looseness, the passion, the aliveness. Keep an eye not to lose that freedom, but feel free to lose it while you're working out anatomical studies. They take some binding attention. Tristan, Joan, sorry not to offer much, but thank you. Jason, I'll come back to you today. Do you know Drew Friedman's work? You have a lot in common with Drew Friedman, this in particular. Phoenix, dude, you're working hard. Line quality concerns, ballpoint pen where you stroke the line multiple times for thick, thin, or single strokes that get it almost arbitrarily, but not arbitrarily. That's why all those practice hours with pen strokes, we'll get to that within the hour. Phoenix, you do well by diagnosing issues and then working on them. You're juggling a lot. Maybe some little help for you today. Sisyphus, you jump in and juggle a lot. No way. We're going to zoom in. We're going to zoom in because this is it's line work worth showing at full res. Even more than full res. Wild. Never seen anyone do that. Everybody, look up here. Look at the economy of line. Sarah, thank you for the kind words. But thank you also for what you put into it. Leo, drawing an image over and over, like learning a song on an instrument, yeah. And Clyde did the same images over and over and over. We know that now. And then the one take 5 or take 15 is so good, it's the keeper. Claire Windling has said she does something like that. Ariel is a jazz musician, likens improv drawing to improv music, the thrill of not knowing. Lewis, kind of hard to read here, but some worthy studies in there. If any quick advice, Lewis, seek plane breaks, like on the frog. Plane breaks come from seeing the form. Una, we'll get back to you later. We're at 4:30. We're supposed to be done. I'm gonna keep going, and the reason I'm going to keep going is because I am teaching you while we give feedback, and we do have to speed up. Gabrielle, yes, more than copying. You are definitely doing more than copying. I'm not too worried about you for copying too much, and those exercises. This is copyrighted, but I'm happy if you share it with your club, with your friends. It is one structure for Kley. I gave it a month of thought. It could spare you making up your own structures, or as I've pitched to you, start with this and adapt it for your needs. There's not much in there about copying. There's mainly in there about studying specific skills that we've already elaborated on. Preston, yes, study comes more naturally to some of us than creativity does, because study has little risk. If we love study, we become scholars, which sounds kind of boring compared to creating. But this was about studying to respond to the study by creating. If you'd like the whole course on Heinrich Kley, go to my website, martialart.com.